don't hear it. Hello, everyone. Shalom, family. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining me for another live. Thanks for joining us, all of you. I see a lot of you in the room. Let's see. Cindy Carr, how are you doing, sis? So good to have you with us. Lorraine, yeah. Brother Calvin, how you doing? Clifford, how you doing? Shirley, optimal training. I still need to get some of that optimal training. Sister Davita, how you doing? Brother Don, how are you? Joy, how you doing? Sister Darnell, Thea, Janet, Patricia, how are you? Good to have you, Vicky. Vicky, Vicky, yeah. Okay, you got me on that one. William, how you doing, brother? Miracle D's, good to have you. Diamond, Portia, Sister Sam, thanks so much for the gift. How you doing, brother Brooks? Harold, got your name mixed up there. Brother Harold Brooks, how are you? Yaquan, good to have you. All of our moderators, good to see you. Jerome, how are you doing? Who else we got? Let my people go. How are you? All right. Maria, good to have you. Cecilia, Brother Charles, Yaz, how are you? Angela, Sarah, Yahoo. All right. D. Wimberly, how are you? Pamela, no, Pamela, how are you? Brother Byron, Hadassah, I love that name. Most High's Child, how are you? How are you? Yamaya, like that too. Percy Williams, oh goodness. All right, well, we got a lot of you. I'm so happy that you're with me tonight. I have a lot to share. So, thank you to all of you tuning in for the first time. It's good to have you. And I do want to say that I'm warning you in advance. Tonight's session is going to be a bit heavy for some because I will be sharing some more of the stories from the book American History by Theodore Weld that I shared this past Sunday. And yeah, it can be a bit rough. I'm not going to lie. So, our topic is a continuation of Christianity's false love doctrine. And if you haven't watched it, I really encourage you to go back and watch that because, according to Christians, we're supposed to love everybody. And what we're asking is, did you love us during slavery? So I shared information from that book, and I also put a link in that video on Sunday for those who want to download the PDF version of it. I actually purchased a copy a couple years ago, and I'm just telling you, you have to read a few stories and then just put it down and walk away because if you try to get through it all, it can build up a lot of feelings, in you. Yeah. So I want to share some more of those stories because he compiled information from actual witnesses, those who were active and former slave owners, to expose how barbaric slavery was. And this is why they're so afraid of this truth coming out. My husband and I were watching TV this past weekend, and on some of the local channels, they were sharing Black history stories, of course, in honor of Black History Month. It seems like this is the only appropriate time to talk about it. But I don't know if you've noticed this, but there seems to be a list of acceptable Black history stories. And those are the only ones we hear about year after year. Why? Because those stories won't make them feel guilty or uncomfortable. So every year we hear about Ida B. Wells or, Martin Luther King. They'll pick, some of the things to talk about, the I Have a Dream, and that's pretty much it. Because they want to promote the idea that we overcame and look at how much better things are now. But if you talk about the savagery that went on or mention folks like Nat Turner, Malcolm X, then you're being divisive. You're being divisive. Sister Deborah talked about how the Native Americans had a name for the behavior of those who cannot acknowledge their atrocities, called Wedico, and it's supposed to be a disease. The Native Americans called it a disease of the mind. When you kill folk and then you ask them, why are they hurting you? So let's take it a step further. We know what our ancestors did to you, is what they're saying. We know what they did. But we don't want to feel guilty about that. So you need to get over it. You need to get over it. You're dealing with the trauma and the fallout, but you need to get over this because we don't want to feel guilty. So we're just not going to talk about it. That's a problem. What do you call that type of person? Because I'm thinking, as I try to put a name on it, this word or this name, Wedico, is really the only thing that comes to mind for me. I don't know what else you would call that. But anyway, so as we try to uncover and tell the horrors that our ancestors went through, they say we are being divisive. But listen to this now. The group that cannot be named, and you all know who I'm talking about, they can talk about what they went through in Germany, and it's no big deal for them to receive reparations for what happened there. But the inhumane treatment our people suffered through for centuries need to be debated upon for decades to determine if reparations are needed. I remember when we lived in Germany and we brought my mother for a visit and we took her to Dachau. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. But you all, I don't know if you've been, but it's a pretty moving experience. And folks were in tears and crying. They identified with the horror that went on. So people afterwards, they were expressing, their feelings about it. But we endured centuries, and we're not allowed to talk about it. We can't tell the truth because they don't want to feel guilty. Does that make any kind of sense? These things didn't happen in the dark. And as the author of this book that I'm talking about says, he collected 1,000 witnesses so that white America would be without excuse. And not only that, we need to know this. We need to know what happened because this is the information they would not allow in the history books. And a lot of our ancestors were so traumatized, they didn't talk about it. I remember one of my aunts saying this. She said, the old people didn't tell us anything. So just think about how much fear had to be embedded in them, that they couldn't even share their stories. Well, no more. We're going to talk about it. We're going to tell it. But we also need to understand it from their perspective. And there's a reason for this. It might help you to understand Wetico. You need to understand. I don't know that you really can understand that mindset, but some of the information that I'm going to share with you will help you to see how they're thinking, how they're processing. Because if you don't, you'll keep scratching your head wondering, why can't they see how much damage they've done? So I get emails or messages from folks basically telling us we need to stop our griping. And if you don't like it here, go back to Africa. I laugh. Can I just go ahead and be on? I laugh because that tells you what you're dealing with. You cannot even acknowledge our pain. You're offended because we're telling you about our pain. What are we dealing with here, family? Yeah. So before I read the stories, I'm going to play a few videos from Richard Wolff. And if you don't know him, he's an economist and a professor of economics. And the first one is a bit lengthy, but I really want you to listen to what he's saying, because it will give you a summary of their rise and fall the way they see it. He's basically in this video telling America that their party is over and they need to find a way to deal with it because China is going to be the premier nation. So yeah, in other words, it's almost like the feel that I got from it is like they're trying to prepare Americans for what's coming. I don't know that they can really be prepared for this. I honestly don't. But I want you to pay close attention to what he says at the end of this first video. Pay attention. Listen to this.
But before I start, I have to ask you to understand something you probably already understand. It's that old adage that if you don't like the message, please don't take your anger out on the messenger. I am going to be describing to you as best I can what the situation is with the United States' economic system, which has a name. It's called capitalism. And it is, to give you a hint of where we're going, it is a system in very deep doo-doo. It is in the greatest difficulty that I have ever seen in my life. And you can tell from my white hair that I've been around a while. I never expected to see what I am experiencing. And I imagine for many of you, it is the same, unless you are committed to something my psychotherapist wife explains to me as the problem of denial. Not a river in Egypt, but an inability to confront what it is that's going on, because it's frightening. It's a very human thing to do. It's like a little child who puts his or her hands in front of her face when there's a scary dog in the neighborhood, because she still imagines at age 3 that if you don't see it, it isn't there. And if you don't see what's going on around us, then perhaps it isn't there. And that is something which our political leaders and our cultural leaders and our economic leaders, that's one thing they all have in common with very few exceptions, namely a commitment to denial. So my presentation today is going to try to break through all the mechanisms of denial that surround us in order to tell you what I think is going on. I'm not infallible. I make mistakes like everybody else, but this is the fruit of a lifetime of observing U.S. capitalism, which I was born in the United States in Youngstown, Ohio. I've lived and worked here all my life. I have never seen anything like the situation we are in now. And to give you the framework and then jump in, I think that the history of the world is a sequence with interruptions, but a sequence of empires. The Greek, the Roman, the Persian, the Egyptian, the Chinese, I mean, I could go on. And they all have something in common. They are born usually out of the demise of another empire. They evolve and change over a period of time, running from a few decades to a few centuries, and then they die. They pass away. The most recent one, perhaps the most and best studied, was the British Empire, which, depending on how you want to count, goes from around the 16th century to the end of the 19th, more or less. So 3 or 4 centuries, depending on how you count. And out of the disintegration of the British Empire, literally punctuated by the war, the Independence War that swirled around Boston, right where you are, a part of that empire broke away. And in an important lesson, the empire denied that this was building, even though it was building across the entirety of the 18th century. Denied it. And then in 1776, the denial blew up in its face as the colonists here in this part of the British Empire, by the way, a relatively small, relatively unimportant part of the empire, wanted its independence. And a war was fought, which, to the surprise and chagrin of the British Empire and George III sitting on his throne in England, the British lost. Not to be forgetful, let me remind you that in 1812, they tried again, and they lost again. And with that, set in motion the disintegration of the British Empire, which ended in World War I. Out of it emerged the American Empire. American capitalism across the 19th century resolved certain key internal contradictions, holding them back, most notably the bizarre coexistence in this country of a capitalist Northeast and Midwest and a slave South. That was resolved by the willful destruction of slavery by the capitalists. Remember, the Civil War is the expropriation without compensation of the single most important wealth of the South in this country, the slave. The slave was emancipated and thereby the white master impoverished. A very stark disregard for the sanctity of private property.
Did you hear what he said? Our freedom was a willful destruction of slavery by capitalists. Let me repeat what he said at the end. He said that the Civil War was the expropriation without compensation of the single most important wealth of the South, the slave. You all. Basically, they took away the right of the whites in the South to continue to enrich themselves of our free labor, is what he said. So when our people were emancipated, he's saying the white man or the Southern white man became impoverished. Now, note that he forgot to mention that a lot of the slave owners were paid. We have yet to receive reparations. So I need you to understand their mindset. Really, it was a total disregard for the sanctity of private property, is what he's saying. When they took away their right to enslave us, he said it was a disregard for the sanctity of private property. Are you understanding that our pain and suffering meant nothing to them? They saw us as their private property, nothing more. And again, I have to add these little statements. We know that a small percentage who are humane did not think this way, but they did benefit from it. But I need you to see the mindset of the overall majority. Now listen to this next clip from him.
Over the last 40 years, roughly 1980 to now, we have seen, and all economists of all political persuasions understand this and see it. We all use basically the same numbers, and with a few exceptions, of course, always we come to the same conclusion. Over the last 40 years, there has been a radical redistribution of wealth from the bottom and the middle to the top. And the more top you get, the top 10% have done really well. The top 5%, even better. The top 1%, even better than that. And the top 1/10 of 1%, the best of all. And you know them because in our society, we adulate them. I'm talking about Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Warren Buffett or fill in the blank. You know them. Our culture makes sure you know them. They became much richer. The top 10% became richer all across those 40 years. This was partly because, very important that you understand this, it was partly because we changed the tax laws in this country. We relieved taxes from corporations and the rich, and we switched them onto the middle and bottom. It was done by Republicans. It was done by Democrats. It didn't matter who was in the White House or who was controlling the houses of the Congress. The Democrats did it a little less quickly. The Republicans were a bit more intense. Speed varied. Content did not. Even more important than the changes in taxes was the phenomena of the relationship between capital and labor. That is, corporations and business on the one hand, and the mass of people, employees, on the other. As I've told you, real wages went up for a century, 1870s, 1970. Why 1970 do I pick that? Now I can tell you, because that's when real wages in America stopped rising. Absolutely epoch-making change. What is a real wage? It's the amount of money you get adjusted for the prices you pay. So, for example, if your wages go up 10%, you might feel good, but if all the prices you have to pay went up by 10%, you're no better off with a 10% bigger money wage than you were without it, because the prices have adjusted. We all know that in economics, so we don't use money wages, we use what's called real wages. Wages understood in terms of what it can afford you to buy: goods, services, food, clothing, shelter, entertainment, education, medical care, whatever.
Okay, family. You notice that he said something happened in the 70s. That was the last time they were receiving real wages. Okay, why do you think that is? What happened during the 60s that led to them not receiving real wages in the 70s? What was going on in the 60s? What was happening? I'm going to give you a few seconds to put your answers in there. Tell me what was going on. Civil rights. There you go, Jerome. Woo-hoo, you got it. Civil rights. In the 60s and 70s, they didn't have us, they could no longer box us in to the free or almost free labor. That's what was going on. That's what he didn't say, because that didn't just happen by accident, that in the 70s that they didn't have real wages anymore. He said it stopped in the 70s. It's because of what happened in the 60s. You had all of the protests and the marches and the civil rights. So they had to start paying real wages. Well, we know it took some time, but you had human rights violations occurring. This is where their anger is coming from. You have to understand that for them, this is about protecting their way of life. Basically, they're telling you that your trauma is not their problem. Now, you pause and think on that. Get over it, is what they're telling you. Here's what you don't get. Both of us can't be empowered at the same time. One has to submit to the other, because the way this society has been set up based on capitalism, it cannot work without free or almost free labor. We provided that for centuries, free labor. Now that that is ending, that's why this system is crumbling. Now, from their perspective, okay, because we know that there was an end date to our suffering. We know that. I'm trying to get you to see how they're seeing it from their perspective. This capitalistic society cannot work without free or almost free labor. So what did they do when they lost our free or almost free labor? They started shipping things off to countries where corporations could pay pennies. Are you getting this? Are you understanding this? This nation cannot survive. And he's basically telling his people, it's over. It's over. The end has come. So, what we have to understand is when they're saying, make America great again, you now understand what they're talking about. They're not talking about you. When they say pray for America, they're praying for things to go back to the way it was. And that does not include you. This system was not built for you. Therefore, it can never work for you. Plain and simple. It can never work for us. So now, well, let me get a few comments before I start reading. Woo, you all been typing away. Typing. Thank you. Who is this I'm looking at? Victorious Ron. Thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for your support, all that you're doing. Thank you. I appreciate it. Look, family. Yeah, let's see what you all are talking about, and then we'll go on. So we have Most High's child. Let's get it. All right. We need to get out of this, I tell you. Taffany says tough and most needed. Let's see. Charles West, it's a little triggering. Yeah, I understand. Trust me. I understand. Byron says, give it to us straight with no chaser, please. Okay. Remember you said that now. Remember you said it. Portia, that's okay. If this subject tonight is heavy, this channel is for meat and not milk. You got that right. You got that right. So, yeah, Cecilia says you can't sugarcoat this stuff. We need to hear it. We need to hear it. And family, the other thing is we need to learn to speak about it. We need to speak about it, because I can tell you what, a lot of our people are still sitting in churches where these pastors are telling them, you need to pray for America. It's your duty to be praying for America, to be praying for this government. Well, I want you to have an answer for that. You need to tell them, yes, we are praying for America. We're praying for judgment. And when they pick themselves up off the floor and ask you, well, how could you say such a thing? This is a God-fearing, loving nation. Then you need to respond by saying, how well did you love us during slavery? That's our response. That is our response. No, we don't need to sugarcoat anything anymore. We need to tell it like it is. We need to make sure we know what's going on, because our young people, they're being programmed to think, well, slavery wasn't that bad. They were indentured servants. So no, we need to tell the truth. Say it loud. We need to put it out there. Wherever they turn, it's slapping them in the face. All right, so I'm going to start reading some of these. And all right, remember you all said you want it with no chase. Y'all are too much. All right, let's go. Let's go with this first story. So this is the narrative and testimony of Sarah M. Grimke. It says, Miss Grimke is a daughter of the late Judge Grimke of the Supreme Court of South Carolina and sister of the late Honorable Thomas S. Grimke. A slave who had been separated from his wife because it best suited the convenience of his owner ran away. He was taken up on the plantation where his wife, to whom he was tenderly attached, then lived. His only object in running away was to return to her. No other fault was attributed to him. For this offense, he was confined in the stocks 6 weeks, in a miserable hovel, not weather-tight. He received 50 lashes weekly during that time, was allowed food barely sufficient to sustain him, and when released from confinement, was not permitted to return to his wife. His master, although himself a husband and father, was unmoved by the touching appeals of the slave, who entreated that he might only remain with his wife, promising to discharge his duties faithfully. His master continued inexorable, and he was torn from his wife and family. The owner of the slave was a professing Christian in full membership with the church, and this circumstance occurred when he was confined to his chamber during his last illness. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the false love doctrine. We want to know, how well did you love us during slavery? This man only wanted to return to his wife, to his family. And isn't that what this nation's supposed to be all about? He wanted to return to his wife, and they would not allow it. Now you tell me, what is that called? What is that? Let's look at this from Matthew 5. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Do you think we have something against those who claim to be Christian? And do you think they know about it? Of course they know about it. But as I just said, they don't care. They're more concerned about their way of life. Their way of life. So it bothers them that we feel a need to talk about this, to expose what really happened. No, they want happy singing slaves, entertaining them. That's what they want. But this verse is saying, if you remember that your brother has something against you, oh no, you need to leave that gift there and go your way and be reconciled to your brother. They have never attempted to be reconciled. And as I read through some of these stories, you're going to understand why. So I am going to upload some of these stories to the channel and probably post one a day for a couple days so that our people will learn the truth about Black history. They'll be short, so please share them. Even though you've heard some of them, share them so that our people will know what really happened to our ancestors. We need to end this by permission. We'll tell you which stories you can share and which ones you can't. We don't want you sharing anything that's going to cause division. Well, in order to have division, you would need to be united. There's never been unity in this nation between us and them. Never. And we cannot unite around lies. We cannot unite. No, we cannot unite. So I do believe in some aspects, our passivity has been a problem because they have shamed us into silence. Listen to what I'm saying. They have shamed us into silence. You're not walking in love. You're being divisive. You're being divisive when you expose the truth. And what's even more appalling is It's being upheld by the quote unquote church. But we have scripture saying if your brother sins against you, go and tell him. You're supposed to tell him how he sinned against you. We find that in Matthew 18:15. But no, don't talk about it because you're being divisive. Let's listen to this next story. Let's go on. It says, a punishment dreaded more by the slaves than whipping, unless it is unusually severe, is one which was invented by a female acquaintance of mine in Charleston. I heard her say so with much satisfaction. It is standing on one foot and holding the other in the hand. Afterwards, it was improved upon, and a strap was contrived to fasten around the ankle and pass around the neck, so that the least weight of the foot resting on the strap would choke the person. The pain occasioned by this unnatural position was great, and when continued, as it sometimes was for an hour or more, produced intense agony. I heard the same woman say that she had the ears of her waiting maid slit for some petty theft. This she told me in the presence of the girl who was standing in the room. She often had the helpless victims of her cruelty severely whipped, not scrupling herself to wield the instrument of torture, and with her own hands inflict severe chastisement. Her husband was less inhumane than his wife, but he was often goaded on by her to acts of great severity. In his last illness I was sent for, and watched beside his death couch. The girl on whom he had so often inflicted punishment haunted his dying hours, and when at length the king of terrors approached, he shrieked in utter agony of spirit, "Oh, the blackness of darkness! The black imps! I can see them all around me! Take them away!" And amid such exclamations he expired. These persons were of one of the first families in Charleston. So that imparts that first families in Charleston. So, family, what do you think? Who came to get him? uh, who do you think came to get him? He obviously saw something. He saw something. Let's see what you're saying. mm. Mm, mm, mm. Michael says they ain't gonna fare so well when it's them at the end of those stocks, bonds, and other torturous devices that inflict pain. Yeah, Satan and his imps, somebody said. Charles the nymphs. Somebody came to get him. Dwayne, angel of death. Marilyn says a demon. Yeah. Calvin says it wasn't the Joker. Nope. But this is the book, in case you've not seen it, that I was referencing. It's called American Slavery as It Is by Theodore Dwight Weld. And again, I put the link, if you're not able to find it, in the last upload from Sunday. So you should be able to see it there if you go to the description. Family, oh man. Dawn says, I have often said that the female of them are the worst of the lot. They are more cruel than the males. Because a lot of jealousy was involved as well. A lot of jealousy. Tazuriya says, just go to a nursing home. I've been there, and those Catholic nuns scream helplessly before their passing. They would scream for hours and days. Yeah, I've heard of some of that as well. Mm-hmm. Let me see. It was one person, Rod, said he bought the book on Amazon and it was like under $10, $5 or so. So, yeah, family, as I said, Kathy says, Yah judgment has fallen upon some, is falling, is going to execute judgment in wrath. Yeah. Okay, Jerome said he got a copy of it today. Yeah, as I said, and I mean, you all go through it slowly. Don't try to go through it all at once because it's pretty tough. All right, let me share another one of the stories that I recorded. We begin with the food of the slaves, because if they are ill-treated in this respect, we may be sure that they will be ill-treated in other respects, and generally in a greater degree. For a man habitually to stint his dependents in their food is the extreme of meanness and cruelty, and the greatest evidence he can give of utter indifference to their comfort. The father who stints his children, or domestics, or the master his apprentices, or the employer his laborers, or the officer his soldiers, or the captain his crew, when able to furnish them with sufficient food, is everywhere looked upon as unfeeling and cruel. All mankind agree to call such a character inhuman. In March 1838, Mr. Thomas Larimer, a deacon of the Presbyterian Church in Bloomingbury, Fayette County, Ohio, Mr. G.S. Fullerton, merchant and member of the same church, and Mr. William A. Ustick, an elder of the same church, spent a night with a Mr. Shepherd, about 30 miles north of Charleston, South Carolina, on the Monk's Corner Road. He owned 5 families of Negroes, who he said were fed from the same meal and meat tubs as himself, but that 99 out of 100 of all the slaves in that county saw meat but once a year, which was on Christmas holidays. As an illustration of the inhuman experiment sometimes tried upon slaves, in respect to the kind as well as the quality and quantity of their food, we solicit the attention of the reader to the testimony of the late General Wade Hampton of South Carolina. General Hampton was for some time Commander-in-Chief of the Army on the Canada frontier during the last war, and at the time of his death, about 3 years since, was the largest slaveholder in the United States. The General's testimony is contained in the following extract of a letter just received from a distinguished clergyman in the West, extensively known both as a preacher and as a writer. His name is with the Executive Committee of the American Anti-Slavery Society. Here is the testimony. You refer in your letter to a statement made to you while in this place respecting the late General Wade Hampton of South Carolina, and task me to write out for you the circumstances of the case, considering them well calculated to illustrate 2 points in the history of slavery. First, that the habit of slaveholding dreadfully blunts the feelings toward the slave, producing such insensibility that his sufferings and death are regarded with indifference. Second, that the slave often has insufficient food, both in quantity and quality. I received my information from a lady in the West of high respectability and great moral worth, but think it best to withhold her name, although the statement was not made in confidence. My informant stated that she sat at dinner once in company with General Wade Hampton and several others, that the conversation turned upon the treatment of their servants, etc., when the general undertook to entertain the company with the relation of an experiment he had made in the feeding of his slaves on cotton seed. He said that he first mingled 1/4 cotton seed with 3/4 corn, on which they seemed to thrive tolerably well, that he then had measured out to them equal quantities of each, which did not seem to produce any important change. Afterwards, he increased the quantity of cotton seed to 3/4 mingled with 1/4 corn. And then he declared, with an oath, that they died like rotten sheep. It is but justice to the lady to state that she spoke of his conduct with the utmost indignation, and she mentioned also that he received no countenance from the company present, but that all seemed to look at each other with astonishment. I give it to you just as I received it from one who was present, and whose character for veracity is unquestionable. It is proper to add that I had previously formed an acquaintance with Dr. Witherspoon, now of Alabama, if alive, whose former residence was in South Carolina, from whom I received a particular account of the manner of feeding and treating slaves on the plantations of General Wade Hampton and others in the same part of the state, and certainly no one could listen to the recital without concluding that such masters and overseers as he described must have hearts like the nether millstone. The cottonseed experiment I had heard of before also, as having been made in other parts of the South. Consequently, I was prepared to receive as true the above statement, even if I had not been so well acquainted with the high character of my informant. The character of the informant. You all, they fed those people cotton seed. Now just think about that. Said they died like rotten sheep. No regard, absolutely no regard for all those people that died. He decided to do an experiment. Would you give an animal cotton seed? I mean, cotton seed. Byron says the devil's punch bowl is what this reminds me of. Yes. Yeah. Man, you feed people cottonseed. Lorraine is saying, no, it's not my fault, Lorraine, y'all. You don't tell them it's the Gates of Huldah's fault. She says, I'm getting ready to text my supervisor and say, listen, if I'm late for work, it's at the Gates of Huldah's fault. You better go on to work. Family. Oh my goodness. Some of this. Yeah, Charles, they're still doing their experiments. They are still doing it. They are still doing it. All right, let's listen to another one. I'll just tell you the truth. Legal marriage is unknown among the slaves. They sometimes have a marriage form, generally, however, none at all. The pastor of the Presbyterian Church in Huntsville had 2 families of slaves when I left there. One couple were married by a Negro preacher. The man was robbed of his wife a number of months afterwards by her owner. The other couple just took up together without any form of marriage. They are both members of churches, the man a Baptist deacon, sober and correct in his deportment. They have a large family of children, all children of concubinage, living in a minister's family. If these statements are deemed of any value by you in forwarding your glorious enterprise, you are at liberty to use them as you please. The great wrong is enslaving a man. All other wrongs are pygmies compared with that. Facts might be gathered abundantly to show that it is slavery itself and not cruelties merely that make slaves unhappy. Even those that are most kindly treated are generally far from being happy. The slaves in my father's family are almost as kindly treated as slaves can be, yet they pant for liberty. May the Lord guide you in this great movement. In behalf of the perishing, your friend and brother, William T. Allen. So he took the man's wife. He took his wife. Okay, now I want you to think about this, because they were saying we were animals, chattel. They were feeding them like they were feeding animals, treating them like they were animals. They had no regard for them whatsoever. Now just think about this. If a man is breeding horses and he's selling these horses that he's breeding because they're prized horses, and one day that man decides that the mare, the female horse, is looking pretty good to him. Just think about this now. He begins lusting after the mare and begins sleeping with the female horse. Is that not the same concept here? They were saying we were animals, but yet you took this man's wife. You sleep with your animals? Is that making any kind of sense? I mean, I'm just thinking about it. What do you all think? How does that work? How does that work? Kathy says we were animals, but when it came down to going to the women to sleep around with the animal, yeah. I mean, is that not sick? Most High's child, they are sick. Yes. Bithia, say it. I mean, think about it. It's sick. So you are sleeping with the animals. You are telling people they're animals. They're no better than animals. They're beasts. But yet you take the man's wife. And we know it happened quite a lot. Quite a lot. Yeah, Portia. Just think about it. Pamela, when you operate in the spirit of the dog, all you can do is be the dog. I mean, oh boy, yeah. Waverly, just barbaric. Yes. Yes. Devorah, depraved, to say the least. Yeah. Brother ASAP, how you doing? They not only using slaves for free labor, but for lust as well. The Most High will not give them a pass. I mean, it's not making sense to me. How do you wrap your brain around the fact that you are saying these people are animals, but yes, Brother Asaph, sleeping with the men and the boys as well. So they were just free to live out all of their demonic desires. They just had their way. They had a party. They had a party going on. Oh, okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. This is the testimony of the Reverend William T. Allen, late of Alabama. Mr. Allen is a son of the Reverend Dr. Allen, a slaveholder and pastor of the Presbyterian Church at Huntsville, Alabama. He has recently become the pastor of the Presbyterian Church in Chatham, Illinois. I was born and have lived most of my life in the slave states, mainly in the village of Huntsville, Alabama, where my parents still reside. I seldom went to a plantation, and as my visits were confined almost exclusively to the families of professing Christians, my personal knowledge of slavery was consequently a knowledge of its fairest side, if fairest may be predicated of foul. There was one plantation just opposite my father's house in the suburbs of Huntsville belonging to Judge Smith, formerly a senator in Congress from South Carolina, now of Huntsville. The name of his overseer was Toon. I have often seen him flogging the slaves in the field, and have often heard their cries. Sometimes, too, I have met them with the tears streaming down their faces and the marks of the whip or whelks on their bare necks and shoulders. Toon was so severe in his treatment that his employer dismissed him after 2 or 3 years, lest, it was said, he should kill off all the slaves. But he was immediately employed by another planter in the neighborhood. The following fact was stated to me by my brother, James M. Allen, now residing at Richmond, Henry County, Illinois, and clerk of the circuit and county courts. Toon became displeased with one of the women who was pregnant. He made her lay down over a log, with her face towards the ground, and beat her so unmercifully that she was soon after delivered of a dead child. Mr. T. related the whipping habits of one of his uncles in Virginia. He was a wealthy man, had a splendid house and grounds. A tree in his front yard was used as a whipping post. When a slave was to be punished, he would frequently invite some of his friends, have a table, cards, and wine set out under the shade. He would then flog his slave a little while, and then play cards, and drink with his friends, occasionally taunting the slave, giving him the privilege of confessing such and such at his leisure. After a while, flog him again, thus keeping it up for hours or half the day, and sometimes all day. This was his habit. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. So they had no regard for the young, the old, a woman with child, no regard whatsoever, because they were animals, just mere animals, according to them. So, his namesake 7, I've been said the Most High will charge them with bestiality by their own admission. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Black Beauty, they love sheep, bestiality, and dogs. And dogs. Yeah. Harold says hard to stomach. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Y'all. Mm. Yeah, family. Family, family, family. Some of this is like, y'all, it's like, it's incredulous, really, to think that people could be that wicked. And remember, they're trying to protect their way of life. But this part, they don't want to remember. They don't want to remember that part. Yeah. All right. Let's look at another one. This is the testimony of Mr. William Poe. Mr. Poe is a native of Richmond, Virginia, and was formerly a slaveholder. He was for several years a merchant in Richmond and subsequently in Lynchburg, Virginia. A few years since, he emancipated his slaves and removed to Hamilton County, Ohio, near Cincinnati, where he is a highly respected ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church. He says, "I am pained exceedingly, and nothing but my duty to God, to the oppressors, and to the poor downtrodden slaves who go mourning all their days could move me to say a word. I will state to you a few cases of the abuse of slaves, but time would fail if I had language to tell how many and great are the inflictions of slavery, even in its mildest form." Listen as he tells this story. Benjamin James Harris, a wealthy tobacconist in Richmond, Virginia, whipped a slave girl 15 years old to death. While he was whipping her, his wife heated a smoothing iron, put it on her body in various places, and burned her severely. The verdict of the coroner's inquest was, "Died of excessive whipping." He was tried in Richmond and acquitted. I attended the trial. Some years after, this same Harris whipped another slave to death. The man had not done so much work as was required of him. After a number of protracted and violent scourgings, with short intervals between, the slave died under the lash. Harris was tried and again acquitted because none but blacks saw it done. The same man afterwards whipped another slave severely for not doing work to please him. After repeated and severe floggings in quick succession for the same cause, the slave, in despair of pleasing him, cut off his own hand. Harris soon after became a bankrupt, went to New Orleans to recruit his finances, failed, removed to Kentucky, became a maniac, and died. And died. Y'all, he cut off his own hand because he knew he was not going to be able to please his slave master. Now, that's what I'm saying. It's a lot of this stuff is like, oh my gosh, I would not have known that. I didn't know they were feeding our people cotton. See, I mean, some of this stuff is almost like they were looking for the most inhumane thing to do. It's like, let's let's think of even more wicked things to do. It's just, it's hard to wrap your brain around some of this. It really is. Michael says these slave masters apparently have the spirit of Pharaoh on them as instruments of terror versus Yah's people. For sure. For sure. ASAP, they kill us and hold themselves not guilty. Yeah, they're blameless. They're blameless. Black Beauty says demon possess. Yeah, for sure. Proving that, yeah, mixed with something. I mean, I don't know how you do that to another human being. Dave says this is nothing to how we're being tortured in hell. Well, you're definitely right. You don't want to go there. You don't want to go through it here and then go there. Yes, wise society. They do the most vile things and tell us to turn the other cheek. And we've been trained to do so. Just think about it. Just think about it. Shelley, they wanted us to be aware of our sins while not taking accountability for their own. Yes, absolutely. All right, I think I'm going to share one more and then take some comments because, yeah, it's a lot to get through. This is the testimony of Philemon Bliss, Esquire. Mr. Bliss is a highly respectable member of the bar in Lorain County, Ohio, and member of the Presbyterian Church in that place. He resided in Florida during the years 1834 and 5. The following extracts are from letters written by Mr. B in 1835 while residing on a plantation near Tallahassee, and published soon after in the Ohio Atlas. Also from letters written in 1836 and published in the New York Evangelist. He states that slaveholders do not practically regard slaves as human beings is abundantly shown by their own voluntary testimony. In a recent work entitled The South Vindicated from the Treason and Fanaticism of Northern Abolitionists, which was written, we are informed, by Colonel Dayton, late member of Congress from South Carolina. The writer, speaking of the awe with which the slaves regard the whites, says, "The Northerner looks upon a band of Negroes as upon so many men, but the planter or Southerner views them in a very different light." Extract from the speech of Mr. Summers of Virginia in the legislature of that state, January 26, 1832. He says, when in the sublime lessons of Christianity, he, the slaveholder, is taught to do unto others as he would have others do unto him. He never dreams that the degraded Negro is within the pale of that holy canon. President Jefferson, in his letter to Governor Coles of Illinois, dated August 25, 1814, asserts that slaveholders regard their slaves as brutes in the following remarkable language: nursed and educated in the daily habit of seeing the degraded condition, both bodily and mental, of these unfortunate beings, the slaves, few minds have yet doubted but that they were as legitimate subjects of property as their horses or cattle. There you have it. property, cattle. That's pretty much it. That's what you heard Richard Wolff say, right? Private property. They were deprived of their property. Mm, mm, mm. You girl, Micah 2:1, woe to those who think up evil and plan wickedness as they lie in bed. They certainly were doing that. When morning comes, they do it since they have it in their power. Yeah, they were certainly doing that. Mm. Milan, wow, there you go. They said it out their own mouths. The degraded Negro. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to get you to see. Again, a small percentage tried to fight against this. It wasn't enough to make the change. It wasn't enough. So we need to understand that we're looking at things from different sides of the coin. We're seeing it as moral, like this is a moral issue. We're looking at it from a perspective that there is no way you could know the true God of the Bible and treat people like this and think that you won't be punished for it. So how could the Most High not judge this? That's the part I'm not understanding, that they would think that America can escape judgment. How is that possible? If scripture is saying he's just and he's a God of justice, how in the world can they escape this? How? Thea says to be bought, sold, and owned forever was lawful and supported by the United States and European powers from the 16th to the 18th centuries. And that's pretty much what Richard Wolff was saying in his video, that the plan was that this system was to continue forever. Forever. But now it's falling apart. And this is why you see a lot of them so depressed and whatever they're calling it, that they can't understand why they're having so many deaths among certain groups. It's because the dream is over. The dream is over. Dave says payback is a dog. Only 60 games played. They have a judgment in their land. They cannot and will not escape it. And yeah, and that's what he's trying to do with his video, trying to get them to see that this is over. He's looking at it from an economist perspective, basically showing them that this economy is done, that it cannot bounce back. And you all, the judgment that came upon Egypt systematically destroyed their economy. Egypt was never the same. Never the same. And so this thing is being unraveled. It really is. And now you think about what's going to happen next. So as the economy continues to crash, and we see prices for things getting higher and higher, and you see depression setting in, and then for us to be talking about reparations, what do you think is going to happen after that? just think about that. Just think about that. What do you think comes next? Civil war. Civil war, because they don't want to be deprived of what they think belongs to them. That's exactly the word I was about to say, Brandy. White privilege. That's exactly what it is. That's what we're talking about here. Yeah, white privilege. That is what we're looking at. Because They feel we've taken something from them. Now, oh my gosh, we're not going to talk about everything they took from us, but they see it as us taking something from them. And then that's when you're going to have all hell break loose. Because, oh no, you can't have us having more than them. Oh no, that's just not going to work. That's just not going to work. Family, look, you all know. You all know that something has to happen before the Most High steps in and put an end to all this, but we know it's coming, right? You have to know that it is coming. So you need to be prepared in your mind and in your heart, and also understand that it sets up an opportunity for the Most High to move mightily on our behalf. So we have to understand that, just think about when Pharaoh's army started chasing them after they left Egypt. Now, our people were falling apart out of fear, but that created the opportunity for the Most High to do miraculous things, to open up the sea in front of them, for them to walk through on dry land. And then he's protecting them from this enemy that's trying to chase them. They couldn't come near them until that water had parted and they weren't going through in mud, trying to slug through in mud. But then what happened to Pharaoh's army when they went in to chase after them? They drowned. So we need to understand that the things that are coming, it's the Most High's opportunity to shine. He's going to deliver us with a mighty hand. So certain things will have to happen for those things to take place. Our task is to trust and obey. Trust him that he is a deliverer. He delivered our forefathers. He delivered them and brought them out with a mighty hand. The obey is do what he tells us to do. Do what he tells us to do, not try to do our own thing. Because this system was not built for us. We are never going to rise to the top in this system. It was not made for us. We have to seek Yah's way, know what his plan and purpose is for us. He's the one who gives us the power to get wealth. We don't get it in our own strength. So those who are trying to compare with these people, are you willing to do what they did to get it? That's the question right there. You think about everything that I just read. This is how this nation got its wealth. Are you wanting to do that? Pause and think on that. Pause and think on that. This system is not for us. It's not. Yes, Michael, it was for our chastisement, and he allowed it. He allowed it. But this isn't Yah's way. This isn't how he operates. The top 1% are the only ones who are really thriving in this land. What middle America failed to understand is that they are pawns in this game as well. They were created to manage and control us. But right now, if you listen to all of the video by Michael Wolff, he's basically saying that the middle class is basically gone. It is basically gone. And the top 1% has gotten richer as everyone else has gotten poorer. What kind of a just system is that? Is that the type of system that the Most High would put in place? Just think about that. It cannot work without the wickedness. It crumbles because you have to have certain things in place for this thing to work. It's a failed system. And the only system that works is Yah's way, his way. That's it. That's it. Nothing else is going to work. So we can't be trying to compare ourselves to them, because I'm not willing to sink that low. I'm not willing to sink low, period. But you have to think about what they did to get what they have. That's correct, Baruch. The playing field was never level. Never. But we know when we leave here, we are going out paid. We are leaving here paid. Now that's just a fact. We're not leaving here empty-handed. Now that is for certain. I can look. We're not leaving here empty-handed. Thank you, Waverly, for the gifts. And several of you have been giving gifts. Y'all, sometimes when I get started on this, I'm just so focused on this. And I know, trust me, I do appreciate all of you that have been giving in the super chats and supporting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just know that it is appreciated. But yeah, once I get started, sometimes it's kind of hard to go back and stop and go through it. So I appreciate that. And I do thank you for it. You and all of the others. If I missed anyone, then my apologies to you. But yeah, family, oh my gosh. This is, yeah, you said you wanted it without a chaser. So yeah, we need to know our story. And we need to tell it. We can't allow them to muzzle us anymore, try to guilt us into not talking about this, telling us that we're not walking in love or we're being divisive if we talk about this stuff. No, that is a lie. They need to own what they have done. And for some reason, they can't seem to do that. So the Most High is going to make sure we know what happened. We need to know what has happened, because when our deliverance comes, it's going to be even sweeter for us, knowing where he brought us from, the fact that there's still a remnant. After everything we went through, there is still a remnant. It's amazing that we still have a remnant here in this earth, because they have literally tried to wipe us out. Look, Esau got his revenge in a big way. I'm just trying to tell you, he got his revenge. But we know we got next. We got next. Thank you, Dee, for the super chat. I appreciate that. We got next. Their time of reaping is here. And we know that you're always going to reap more than you have sowed. So they're going, these curses have now passing on to them. It's passing on to them. And they need to understand that they are the same way they tell us to get over it. Those words are going to come back to bite them. It's going to come back. All the things that they've been saying to us, it's going to come back. They are going to reap. They are going to reap what they have sown. You need to see it for us as we've been sowing too. We have seed in this ground. Our harvest is coming, and we are not leaving here empty-handed. I'm just trying to tell you, Harvest time is coming. We've sowed centuries of free labor, and that is crying out to Abba Yah. The wages are crying out to him. So we have to receive recompense for what has been done. It has to come. It has to come. Yes, Talisha, we have a lot of blood in the ground here. Joy says they thought we would all die off within a few years after the emancipation. But yes, Yah kept us. He kept us, family. Wow. Yes, Dawn, the wages and the innocent blood. I'm just trying to tell you. Sister Jill, how you doing, sister? Says Billy Graham's wife said, if Yah doesn't judge America, he has to repent for Sodom and Gomorrah. Ain't that the truth? You all, Asaph, I heard a Gentile workmate say, in 40 years from now, they won't exist because of their sexual preferences and the lack of babies being born. And they also don't see that as judgment, you all. That's exactly. It's the same thing that they did to us. They've been controlling our numbers. That's what happened when they realized that they couldn't continue on with slavery the way they were doing. Then they had to control our numbers. They had to control it and then enact all of the wicked laws to keep us in a place of servitude. Some call it freedom. That's not freedom. That is not freedom. The king's daughter says, the earth is declaring Yah's glory. Absolutely. D-Mac, they're going to pay with compounded interest. You got that right. You got that right. I'm just telling you, yes, yes. Queen Mommy, thank you. Most High, we are truly grateful. Yes, for what he's doing. So I know it's hard hearing these stories, but you all, we're coming out on the backside of this. This is almost done now for us. This is almost over for us. Now it's time for us to look back and reflect and see that the Most High kept us. He kept us. But we know that he is true to his word. We have a covenant. We have things that have been promised to us. So we look at these stories so that we can see that their time of reaping what they have sown is coming. They may not want to hear it. I need you to understand this. We have to say it. We have to put it out there. Because they will be without an excuse. They will not be able to say that we didn't know. And a small percentage will repent and try to make recompense. There will be those who will be building up our walls, but the vast majority will not. They will not. So we need to understand that we have to say it. We have to declare it. This is an indictment. Whether they want to hear it or not, we need to keep saying it. This is what happened. This is what you did. This is why your judgment is here. Look at your history. Look at it. Y'all, the king's daughter, thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Y'all. Okay, I know I've kept you a while. It's going on 9:34. But family, I hope you understand. Yes, this is tough hearing about these stories. And that one that I did on Sunday. Oh my word, just to read through that sometimes, like you just got to stop till you can collect yourself and go back to it, because I can't even fathom. I cannot fathom how could you do this? And the stories in there to talk about, and this one was a preacher in the church. He was a pastor. He'd do such and such to the slaves, and then he would go to preach. I'm just like, what? Wise society, thank you so much for the gift. I just, family. I want to read this quote from Nehemiah Calkins. This was one of the ones from the book that gave his testimony of this. He says, "Is the ear of the Most High deaf to the prayer of the slave? I do firmly believe that their deliverance will come, and that the prayer of this poor afflicted people will be answered. Emancipation would be safe. I have had 11 winters to learn the disposition of the slaves, and am satisfied that they would peaceably and cheerfully work for pay. Give them education, equal and just laws, and they will become a most interesting people. Oh, let a cry be raised, which shall awaken the conscience of this guilty nation to demand for the slaves immediate and unconditional emancipation." Well, we know what happened as a result. They couldn't bring themselves to do it. They could not bring themselves to do it. So there is no doubt that voices were ringing out during slavery to condemn what was going on. But as I said, it wasn't enough to override the wishes of the immoral majority. So are these the actions of moral beings claiming to be Christians? This nation set itself up as the moral compass of the world. The moral compass of the world. One nation under God, they said. Which God? Which one are you talking about? Because it's not the one we see in Scripture. It is not the one of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, yeah, we know. Yeah, Harold, what a joke. Black Beauty, they are not moral by any stretch of the imagination. Wise societies, they're Greco-Roman deities. Kathy says, not Yahuwah. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Yah is my protection, and they have all drunk from her cup of fornication. Yes, sassy, frassy, justice doesn't sleep forever. No, it doesn't. Loved by Yah, it's the God they created. You got that right. Rod C., 1 Enoch 84, 89 through 89 describes what the sheep would go through under the beasts of the earth. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Oh, yeah, I know it was a lot, but I do thank you for hanging in there with me. Look for more on this in the next video, not the stories. We're going to focus on love, because that's who they are saying they are, that we're under the law of love. And that's why Christians no longer have to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, because they're under the law of love. So based on what I shared tonight, how well did they love us during slavery? How well did they love us? So as we continue talking about Christianity's false love doctrine, be sure to tune in for the next session. And I ask also that you share those short videos to highlight the atrocities of slavery. This is real Black history. They want us to talk about Ida B. Wells. No, this is real Black history. This is it right here. So that's it for this session, family. Again, thank you all for the super chats, for all who support, for those of you who are here whenever we do the lives, listening to the channel and sharing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, because it's my desire that we as a family, as a nation, that we just do our part to spread the word and help with what Yah would have us to do in this awakening. We know that it's ultimately up to Him to wake our people up, but this isn't about us. It's not about us. Only He can give the increase. But we have to keep praying, trusting, and believing. The things that we heard tonight should help us during our time of prayer, and see why justice is needed, see why judgment is needed. So, yeah, if you want to ask me to pray for America, just know that I am. All right, family. You enjoy the rest of your week. Be blessed in all that you do. Shalom, everyone.